Today, we're going to break down one of the biggest topics in economics, inflation. And we're going to look specifically at what's been driving prices up all across India. You know that feeling, right? You go to the store, you buy the exact same stuff you always do, but somehow the bill is just higher. It feels like your money just isn't stretching as far as it used to. Well, what you're feeling is a real thing, and it's called inflation. So at its core, inflation just means your money buys less than it did before. It's not about one or two things getting pricier. It's a general, steady rise in prices across pretty much the whole economy. Now, to really get a handle on what's happening in India, I want you to think of inflation like a coin. It's got two very different sides. On one side, you have prices being pushed up by rising costs, and on the other, they're being pulled up by way too much demand. Let's start with that first side. So, these are the two main players in our story. You've got cost-push inflation. That's all about supply chain problems. And then you have demand-pull inflation, which is basically the too much money chasing too few goods story. All right, let's dive into side one of our coin, the supply shock. This is also known as cost-push inflation. And with this one, the problem doesn't start with how much money you have, but with the folks who actually make and sell the stuff we buy. The idea here is actually pretty simple. If it costs more to make something, doesn't matter if it's a car or a cup of chai, that extra cost is going to get passed on to you, the person buying it. The costs are literally pushed onto that final price tag. And for India's economy, here's a massive vulnerability. The country imports over 80% of its crude oil. 80%. That means that things happening thousands of miles away can have a direct and pretty immediate impact on prices right here at home. And you can see this incredible domino effect play out. It starts with some global event, say a conflict or a production cut, that makes crude oil more expensive. Right away, you feel it at the petrol pump. But here's the real kicker. Almost everything in India is moved around by trucks that run on diesel. So all of a sudden, it costs more to transport vegetables, milk, cement, you name it. And of course, eventually that cost ends up with you. Okay, let's flip that coin over. Now we're looking at the other side. Demand-pull inflation. This part of the story isn't about rising costs from the supply side. Nope. This is about what happens when there's just too much money chasing after stuff. This is that classic textbook scenario, right? Too much money chasing too few goods. When everybody has more cash to spend and they all want to buy things, but the amount of stuff available to buy hasn't really changed, well, sellers can raise their prices. And they do. That high demand literally pulls the prices up. So where does all this extra money even come from? Well, a few key places. You've got big government spending on things like infrastructure, which puts a lot of money into the hands of workers. Then you have banks making it easier and cheaper to get loans, so people borrow more for things like cars and tractors. And, a growing economy just means more jobs and better salaries. All of that puts more money into people's pockets, fueling more spending. Now, here's the thing. In the real world, it's almost never just one or the other. In an economy like India's, you often have both of these forces pushing and pulling at the exact same time, and that creates a really, really tough challenge. So let's just do a quick recap. On one side of the coin, you have cost-push inflation. That's driven by things outside your control, like global fuel prices that push costs up. On the other side, you've got demand-pull, driven by internal things like government spending that pulls prices up because everyone has more to spend. So when you've got prices being pushed and pulled, it creates a massive headache. The big question is, how in the world do you go about taming this inflationary beast? This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the trillion rupee question. What can you actually do when you're facing this kind of two-sided problem? Well, that responsibility falls mainly to India's central bank. But here's the twist. The Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, has some really powerful tools in its toolbox, but they're really only designed to fight one side of this inflation coin. The RBI's biggest weapon is something called the repo rate. The easiest way to think about it is this. When the RBI raises the repo rate, it makes it more expensive for all the big banks to borrow money. And guess what? They pass that higher cost right on to us. So loans for cars, for homes, for businesses, they all get more expensive. The whole point is to get everyone to maybe borrow and spend just a little bit less, which helps cool the whole economy down. And this is the absolute key takeaway. Raising interest rates is a fantastic tool against demand-pull inflation because it directly tackles that too much money problem. But it's pretty much useless against a global oil price shock. The RBI can't just print more oil. This creates a huge dilemma. If they raise rates too much to fight demand, they could seriously slow down economic growth. But if they don't, prices just keep climbing. It's a constant, delicate tightrope walk. And all of this leaves us with a really big, lingering question. When a huge chunk of your price problem is basically imported from the rest of the world through things like oil, how much control does any one country really have over its own prices? It's the central challenge facing policymakers, not just in India, but all over the globe today.